Hi, I'm Cody, your Hamilton Hills Student Director. Thanks for listening to the message today. You know, I have been around Hamilton Hills for a little while and love what this church is about. And we have a saying that life is messy. And man, that can be true a lot of the times. We hope you are encouraged by today's teaching. And we are passionate about the opening of the Bible and listening to discover what God has to say to us. We firmly believe that we all have a next step that God is leading us towards Him. So, what is yours? Our prayer for Hamilton Hills is that everyone will learn and know that you can hear God's voice and be confident that God hears your voice too. One last thing we want to encourage you in is generosity. We believe that God helps us grow in our faith when we take part in the simple act of giving. Giving to your local church is an important act of worship. And if you would like to do that today, visit the hamiltonhills.org Give tab. Now let's listen to the message that God has for us today.
We all have a story, and I'm just so honored and privileged to be able to share my story, but really God's story that He wrote and His goodness, and I hope that He is magnified and that you see His goodness in my story. But we all do have a story and different upbringings and different experiences that have shaped a lot of who we are today. And if you don't believe me, just think of all your Southern friends. The place where they grew up really influenced how they speak, just like where we grew up influenced maybe the team we root for, the food we like. And you don't really realize that people do things differently until you're around other people that do things differently. Or for me, it was college. One of my college roommates was from Louisiana, and she didn't say you guys. She said y'all. And I do like the South though, because they think that a vegetable is mac and cheese. I'm like, yes, eat your vegetables. And then they bless everyone's heart, but that is not a good thing. You do not want your heart to be blessed. But for me, I grew up a Dodgers fan. I love In-N-Out, and cheesecake is just like the best. And birthdays for me growing up were a huge deal. We celebrated them in the morning. And when I got married 15 years ago, Matt and I got married, and within like 1 month in, it was my birthday, and I thought, this is gonna be the best. I mean, all the girlfriend gifts that, were happening, it's going to be like times 10 because I'm the woman of his dreams, the woman he married. And so sure enough, I was used to, remember, my birthday being in the morning, all day, but right away in the morning, I had a cake or a cheesecake. And so I remember that lunchtime come around, and I think he had said happy birthday, but like no cake, no cheesecake. And I'm trying to be a good wife, trying to not, my face doesn't hide what I'm feeling. And so, of course, the famous question that husbands ask their wife is, are you okay? And I gave him the famous answer of, I'm fine. And if you've been married long enough, you know that I'm fine does not mean you're fine. That is not a good thing. And finally, I broke down like, well, I don't want to be emotional, but I was really expecting my birthday to be celebrated like the minute I opened my eyes and all day. And he goes, babe, I got like all this stuff to make you a cake, and I was going to celebrate after dinner. So he grew up in Maine, and part of his tradition with his family, because all of our families are different and have different traditions, was that they celebrated in the evening. Well, I celebrated in the morning. And so you combine those, and you can imagine, my first married birthday. Well, let me start with my story, though. I was born and raised in California, and most of my summers were spent in the pools of Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, and I grew up in what many would consider mansions. It was typical for me to spend a day with movie directors or lawyers or some of the best educators. And although all that is true and it sounds very glamorous, let me explain. It might not be what you're thinking. You see, the reason I was in these big homes and these mansions was because my mom and I cleaned them. And the reason I spent my summers in the pool is because these families were so amazing that they let me swim there and use their pool. My mom's a single parent, and when I was younger, she had to take me with her to work if I didn't have school that day. And so because my mom didn't really speak English, I was the one who had to translate and have these conversations with the people who hired her, which were these families that I just mentioned, the lawyers and the great educators. And it's hard enough as a parent to tell your child, like, go say hello, go say good morning, let alone in situations like that with telling them about school and how I was doing. You see, my parents are from a small town outside of Mexicali. Mexicali is in Mexico, and it's close enough to the border that once you go past the border, it's Calexico. I'll say it correctly, Calexico. And then where she was from was Mexicali. And they were 17 where they were married, and their marriage ended sooner than it could really begin. And at 18 years old, she found herself, she was expecting, and I'm her only child, so she had never been to America, but she knew that she had heard that you can have a better life in America. You can have, the American dream. And so she made a way and found a way for me to be born in the U.S. When she was pregnant, she moved to California, and the only part of California she knew was the northern part, because a lot of my uncles worked in the fields there. They were seasonal farmers, and so there's a city called Watsonville, and strawberries, like if you buy strawberries at Kroger or somewhere, check to see, sometimes you'll see Watsonville. Well, that's the city that I was born in. And because their marriage really ended sooner than it can begin, she found herself alone in a delivery room. And she was thinking, what do I have to live for? And it's almost like, I imagine like in a movie where she heard my cry and she thought, I have something to live for. And so the divorce caused for us to move to Mexico, and the first 3 years of my life, that's where I spent. So Spanish is my first language, so if I say anything in English that's not like right, now you know. When I was 3 and a half, my mom decided to move back to California. You see, in Mexicali, only 24% of people finish secondary education, and the cartel has a huge influence there. And so her goal was from Mexicali to move to Northern California. It's about a 9-hour drive. And so she broke up the trip and stayed in Los Angeles, where she had a childhood friend that she knew there. And so she wanted to stay with her for a little bit, break up the trip, and then continue on to the north. And so this friend, my mom had no idea that this friend was now a Jesus follower. And so Sunday came around, and she told my mom, on Sundays I go to church now. You can come if you want, but you don't have to. And my mom goes, well, I'll go with you, but I'm not changing. She's like, of course not. You don't have to change. Just, come with me. And so my mom stepped foot into a church much like this. And even though she was familiar with religion, she wasn't familiar with the relationship that Jesus had to offer. She sat in his service, and she heard about God's love and how he loved her so much that he sent his son Jesus to die for us, to pay for our sins and make a way for us to have a relationship with him. And so at that time, she's 21 with a 3.5-year-old, single mom, broken relationship. She was doing drugs and leading to alcohol and just thinking, what do I have to live for? She felt like she had no purpose. So when she walked into these church doors and heard about God's love, it was an overwhelming thing in her life. And no longer did she choose to move to Northern California. What she found was so real and filled that void, and she was hungry. She's like, I want more of this, and I want my daughter to grow up in this. And thank God, because otherwise I'd be a Giants fan. That's not good. I had to throw some humor in there because this is, but our lives really changed from then on. The church became my family. We didn't have any family living in the area, and the church became my family. Anytime the doors were open, we were there. Front row, every service, I was in the front row with her. Every activity. As a teenager, there was never a question if I could go to an event, and if there was no money for that. It was always anything that had to do with growing in my faith. And these families that we worked for, I mean, we had to walk everywhere. We didn't have a vehicle, but you have public transportation. And so it was 1 block to my elementary school, 3 blocks to church, 6 blocks to the laundromat, 7 to the grocery store. And so I learned how to only buy what you can carry in 2 hands. And also, like, make sure I keep my clothes clean because I'm like, oh, laundry. But God was so good in his faithfulness, and I grew up so happy in these families that welcomed us in. And as I got older, I started sending my dad invitations to, like, my graduation, and he didn't come. My college graduation, he didn't come. My wedding, he didn't come. And when you're a child, you kind of just, the life you have is the life you have, and you're happy, and you have friends, and you have your mom, and or whoever you is raising you. And not until you start getting a little older do you start asking a little bit more questions. And it was my mom never stopped me from sending him invites. But as I got older and really learned the story of what she went through, the spiritual and physical stuff that she went through, I was shocked that she wasn't bitter, that she wouldn't speak ill of my dad. It just blew me away. And looking back, those wounds, I can imagine, were so deep. I mean, the stuff that she went through was so deep, yet she allowed Jesus to heal those. And in doing so, she made a way for me to grow up and know about Jesus, make him king of my heart too, and then helped me have some forgiveness in my heart towards my dad. And I was so blown away by that. And our upbringing reminds me of Proverbs 15, 16, 17. Better to have little with the fear of the Lord than to have great treasure and inner turmoil. The bowl of vegetables with someone you love is better than steak with someone you hate. And that's how it was for me growing up. I remember so many times we had, where we lived, it was 7 minutes from the Dodger Stadium. It was kind of on a little hill. And I could see the fireworks, just like the very top of the fireworks on a Friday night from my house. But there was this family in the church, empty nesters, who rented like a little room in the basement for my mom. And so our home was this little room, had a kitchenette and a little restroom. And so because we shared a room and we had our twin beds, and I lived there up until I went to college, I'm a heavy sleeper, and even earthquakes in California could not wake me up. Now it's different. Now, like, Matt breathes and I wake up. I'm like, oh, what's happening? I like this. Now I get to tell stories about him. But the one thing that could wake me up is my mom's voice. And so because her commute to work, taking the bus, sometimes 2 or 3 buses from East Los Angeles to, Santa Monica, Culver City, whatever house she had that day, I remember that she would get up super early, kneel on the side of her bed and pray and seek God. And he changed everything. Yes, she came for the American dream, but really Jesus is what changed our lives. I probably wouldn't have opened my heart to my husband and being even willing to get married if I would have just received all this hate, but she allowed Jesus to heal those wounds. And I don't know what you're carrying today, because we all have a story and we all have different hurts. Some it could be rejection. For some it could be a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship. For some maybe it's loss of a dream. Whatever you're carrying, I beg you, please do not put a Band-Aid on it. A Band-Aid that will give you temporal happiness, maybe a trip or a vacation or a concert. All those things are fun. They will not heal that wound. And when we don't allow Jesus to heal that wound, we will bleed on everybody around us. We will bleed on those that we love. And so I am so thankful. And what an honor to just brag on her a little bit today and honor her and God's faithfulness and how he kept us. Even before we said yes to him, he was already working. And she's still in California, and so believe me, I'm trying to convince her to move, but it's not happening. And so we talk on the phone, and I still talk to her. We talk in Spanish on the phone, and she was telling me about a month ago about this baby shower that she had been asked to speak at. The Lord has done such a great work in her life, and that she's now sometimes invited to these women conferences and is able to speak and share her story. And she was telling me about this baby shower. I'm like, well, tell me about it. Like, what you say, how'd it go? And she said, well, just started thinking about you when you were little. And I just wish I could go back and go to more of your, go to your school events and go to volleyball, your volleyball games. And she had a lot of 3 or 4 years to go because I was a starter for 4 years. Just saying. Don't ask me how big the school was, but I was a starter. And so she's like, I just should have made more time to go to your games. And I said, Mom, I'm holding the tears back. If I cry, I know she can't see me, but if my breathing changes a little bit, she'll know, and then she'll cry more. I was like, Mom, no, that's not the memory that I carry. I carry good memories. I had the best childhood, the best teenage years. And I do remember the game that you did come to. I remember it was in Long Beach. I remember the gym. I remember the bleachers. They were like wooden, I think they were. The uniform that we wore that year, and I was so nervous because my mom is there, and I'm so excited, and I want to show off, and it was probably one of my worst games. But that's the memory that I carry. But us moms, the mom guilt that creeps in. You could be the best mom, spend 2 hours that day at the park with your kids, be fully present, go home, about to go to bed, and you're like, I should have spent 2 hours and 15 minutes with, them, not 2 hours. Oh, am I a bad mom? And the question that I asked Matt so many times, am I a bad mom? No, you're a great mom, but that mom guilt is real. And let's just say that it's not from the Lord, that is from the enemy. So moms, we gotta let that go. But in this phone call, can I teach you a Spanish word? You probably already know it. It's a simple one. Can you say que? You can do better. Que? That means what in Spanish? I should have probably told you what it meant first, right? And so on the phone, Matt doesn't really speak a lot of Spanish, but he's understanding a little bit more. And so he can tell the difference between when my que on the phone with my mom is que, like what? And something we're not blessing someone's heart, okay? But it's just, excitement or something good. And then he notices when the tone is down and it's more of a que, no. And so he heard me on this conversation about the baby shower with my mom and how she was reminiscing. And I got off the phone and he goes, what was that about? And then I filled him in, and that's when my tears came. And I'm ashamed to say that it wasn't really until just sitting there in the moment and remembering and going through that, I think the Lord was already preparing my heart for today, but I thought, wait, it was an evening game. I traveled with the team, Los Angeles, Long Beach. It would have taken my mom probably 3 bus rides to get there. And I realized, Mago, she lived one door down, one house over, and her daughter and I were, she is one of my best friends, and anytime we needed a ride anywhere, Mago. When I went to college, coming, home for Christmas, going back to school, and I needed a ride, Mago. And the Lord started bringing all the people in my life. Not just my mom, but the nurse in the hospital that made an impact in my mom's life. The empty nesters who not only did they rent that room for my mom, but they knew that when she was at work and if I was home alone, she'd bring down a warm plate of food for me. Ecuadorian food, which made me like Ecuadorian food. Carolina, who's a lady that she volunteered, served at church every week with young girls so that my mom could be in, and receive what she needed to receive. And she was always faithful. My youth leaders who really influenced what college I went to, and then from there, I met my husband there, so that's awesome. I think of Gerson and Esther, who they would invite me on vacation with their family to Sequoia, that's why I love Monopoly, is because we played Monopoly every year. And my mom couldn't take vacation days. I mean, she didn't work, she didn't get paid. And so they would invite me with their family, and those memories that I have are just forever part of my life. And then Ezekiel and Miriam, who were my pastor and pastor's wife, who took us under their wing. And on Thanksgiving, my mom, there was a few times that she had to work that day, depending if the family, didn't believe in the holiday or something. But their house was always open for us. And they helped, not just financially, but in the future when the day I got married, he's the one who walked me down the aisle. So all these people, the goodness of God through them that ministered to me, helped change my life. All God's goodness. And it made me think of in Luke 10 when the Good Samaritan, because those people were Good Samaritans. It's interesting because right before the story of the Good Samaritan, if you go read Luke 10, it's awesome, you should do it. There's an expert in the law who's asking Jesus about this commandment of love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. And the second is as important, love your neighbor as yourself. And this expert in the law, the Bible says, in order to justify himself, he goes, well, what is neighbor? Neighbor. And it kind of reminds me of the culture now when we want to justify something. It's like, well, define what that word means, And so Jesus, so lovingly, instead of just giving him the answer right away, he goes into a story, and that's where the story of the Good Samaritan comes in. And there's this Jewish man who's in the middle of the road, and he talks about three men. The first one who came by, a priest, who did not stop, in fact, walked on the other side. And the second one, a Levite. And then the third one was a Samaritan. You would not find a Samaritan and a Jewish person sitting at the dinner table together. But this man stopped. He helped bandage his wounds, put him on his donkey, took him to an inn, took care of him, and then paid for this person to continue taking care of him. And at the end of the story, Jesus goes, so out of all those three men, who is the neighbor? And this expert in the law says, the one who showed mercy. And so all along our lives, if you think about your story, your life, maybe you don't have the relationship with your parent, with your mom or dad, like the one that you heard today. But who are those neighbors? Who are those people that showed you mercy? Maybe it was a coach. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was an actual neighbor right next to you. But God's goodness has been in your story this whole time. And as I was thinking about today and praying and having my quiet time with Jesus, I have some of my favorite songs. I'm like, I should add a favorite song in here. But this song is so powerful, and I'm actually going to invite Braden to come out. Braden's going to sing it for us. And we're not going to learn it as a church. We're not going to stand. We're not going to do any of that. My prayer for you and for me right now is that no matter our story, no matter how different it is, no matter the wounds you've had, that you can see Jesus' goodness, that you can see his faithfulness because his hand has been there the whole time. And so during this song, all I'm asking is that we would stop and reflect and let this song minister to your heart.
I could tell a story, if my life could sing a song, if I have a testimony, if I have anything at all. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. His faithfulness is found. And let my children tell their children, let this be their memory, that all my treasure was in heaven, and you were everything to me. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. You're faithful and has held me off this way. And when I'm old and gray and all my days are numbered on the earth, let it be known in you alone my joy was found. I'm still in love. You're still enough for me. Still all I want is still my everything. I'm still still enough for me. Still all I want. You're still my everything. 'Cause no one ever cared for me like Jesus. Faithful and has held me all this way. And when I'm old and gray and all my days are numbered on the earth, let it be known in you alone my joy was found.
Your whole life, his hand has been there. He has never forsaken you. He has always been there, and he's calling you to himself. And church, I just want to be a people that put him first, that love him. He first loved us. There's nothing we can do in our own strength, and as moms do, our kids know that we love Jesus. You know, we can invest in all the things this world has to offer, but at the end, for what? Sickness, disappointment, divorce, all those things, they're not a respecter of person. Whether you have a big house or a little house, those tough times can come, and the only one that can sustain you is Jesus. And I'm afraid that sometimes we can't see his goodness because our eyes are focused on something else. You can't keep your eyes on Christ and crisis. You can't keep your eyes on Christ and your circumstances. It's one or the other. Now, the beautiful thing about him is that through that storm, he carries you. He's the anchor. Let's fall in love with Jesus, church. Yes, let's enjoy, the blessings and all that stuff, but what's the most important thing? Do our kids know that when it comes to piano lessons, that when it comes to our soccer games or our practices or whatever it is, that even if they have homework, no, who cares? You're gonna go to that. We committed. You'll do your homework after. But when it comes with anything about church, it's, okay, well, you're tired, or yeah, you got homework. Like, what message are we sending our kids? Who's the most important person in our lives? And Jesus doesn't just give us hope, church family. He is our hope. He doesn't just give us peace. He is the Prince of Peace. He doesn't just give us love. He is love. And so my prayer for many of us would be, our first step is to just recognize his goodness, recognize his love. It's there. And then for those who you might feel like, well, I feel like I have gratitude and I'm so thankful. I want that song to be the anthem of my life, the song of my heart. Maybe for us, it's loving our neighbor. Who is it? And it might be inconvenient. It might be that little annoying neighbor kid who comes over and eats all the food in your pantry. But man, the difference we can make. Put your eyes on Christ. Let's love others. Teachers, you do that every time. Those that serve and help others are family ministry. And this is what's encouraging to me. I'm gonna leave you with this last thing. So Matthew 25, talking about like the end, and saying that towards the end of the chapter that Jesus is gonna come and with all his glory and the angels, and he's gonna separate people like sheep and goats. And to the righteous that he puts on his right hand, he's gonna say, enter, enjoy my kingdom. Because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. When I was sick or in prison, you visited me. And those righteous people are gonna look at him and say, King, when were you hungry and we fed you? When were you thirsty and we gave you to drink? And verse 40, and the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Moms, what you do when no one sees, you're doing it as unto the Lord. Those that minister and serve every week when no one's seeing, you're doing it as unto the Lord. Grandmas, maybe you don't see the fruit of your yes to Jesus right now with your own adult children, but your yes to Jesus might be the one thing that influences your grandkids. You're doing that as unto the Lord. So may he be our number one in our lives. He's the one who changes everything, church. So happy Mother's Day. And those that have toddlers, may your coffee be stronger than your toddler. Let's pray. God, you are so good. I love you, Jesus. Thank you. Thank you for your goodness, your faithfulness, how you've carried us, how you protected my mom, protected me, guided us. Thank you for being the king of our hearts, the king of my life. Thank you for being father to the fatherless. God, I pray for those people in this room that need to receive your love when they open their hearts to you, Lord. May they break down those walls, Lord, through your Spirit, do a work. And as a church, would we be on fire for you? Let's put you first. God, draw us to you. Make us more hungry for you, God. And as moms, continue to strengthen us, because we're not perfect and we mess up. But Lord, you have called us, you have equipped us, you have entrusted us with those beautiful children and beautiful teenagers or beautiful adult children. So Lord, I pray that you would guide us, give us wisdom, and as a church family, we just want more of you. May we go out and love you with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, and may we love our neighbors as ourselves too. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.